I have one. I have more. Firefighters, we approved payroll.
Oh yeah, ours was supposed to be like pro hearing I didn't even hire.
If we lose some people so quickly. Payroll based on. Payroll calculated based on 41, but 135. Either that or we're gonna be there.
Yeah, you're sorry, watching now.
From the article. Being 35 right now, we're down to 14 basically. So it's a significant number. You know, there's shortages everywhere in law enforcement right now. So the problem's going to get worse before it gets better. But it's just knowing that you could lose 3 to 4, like, just there's such a short.
Can't be so serious.
36 on average for half a year. That means you're 500, right? 500. So you could be 5 over the other half of the year. Now, I'm not saying you go 5 over. I'm just saying if you got up to 43 and then you lose 4, at least you're down at 39 instead of being down at 37.
It's 6 o'clock, and I believe the meeting is live. So we're getting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. All those able, please rise and face the flag. I think, Kathy, you can stay seated. It's up to you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, Okay. I see that we have 3 members, counting myself virtually, and our manager virtually. And so we'll need to call the roll and mention that as we go forward.
All right, turning my volume up. Supervisor Syka.
I am here virtually from Meridian Township.
Clerk Guthrie is here from Grand Rapids. Treasurer DeShane. Trustee Jackson. Here. Trustee Ostomer.
Present.
Trustee Sunland. I'm here from Grand Rapids. Thank you. And Trustee Wazinski. Present. All members are present.
Thank you very much. We will now have a presentation, and there's a check to be presented. I'm going to call on our treasurer and also our finance director to presentation.
All right, so some of you guys may know we put on a car show recently. Township and Broadband came up. Where's the mic? All right. Hi. So I'm Jordan with High Caliber Carding. This is Evan. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Evan. I'm a real estate agent, local real estate agent that helped Jordan out with the car show that was put on a couple weeks ago.
So we did a car show. We're calling it Meridian Motor Fest. I used to do a lot of charitable car shows and just try to raise money for local proceeds things. And our car community, it's a really tight-knit community, and they do a good job of all coming together. So we put together this festival that we're going to do reoccurringly annually. What we selected this year for the donation was to go to Meridian Cares, back local to the community. We invested heavily into this year because the first year is always the expensive year, getting people to know that it exists, getting advertised out there, and making a big splash the first year so that reoccurringly year after the year we grow that. Now, the way I look at this is everybody here familiar with the Gizzard Fest over in Potterville? That started with something like this. Somebody started with, let's get people together, let's build a community with it. And we have an opportunity to do that. Now, we had people like Evan jump in, and then Kevin with Cars and Coffee. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here. Through all this, he lost both of his parents this year, and during that time, he was helping put this together. We invested over $10,000 into making this event happen. Investing in the assets, distribution of content, labor that goes into it. But the first year was an absolute success. So what we did is we took every person that registered, we just took all that money and it's all going to go to Meridian Cares with it. Next year, I expect that we're going to have a significant amount more as well. But our first year, we had about 170 cars come through. So we ended up with a check here that Evan's going to present for $1,583 to you guys. And I just wanted to say, honestly, thank you guys because the township also helped us out with this, putting it together. So hopefully it gets put to good use. And more to come next year. We're going to keep stacking that up and we'll make this something huge.
Well, thank you for this donation. It will go to help dozens and dozens of families.
Bill, you need to be by the microphone, Bill.
Thank you for the donation. It will help dozens of families this year through the winter season. And also thank you for your multi-million-dollar investment and expansion into high-caliber cutting. You are making a big difference in the revitalization of the mall in this whole region. So thank you for that investment as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to say I wish I was there to shake your hands. I think hard caliber karting has been an outstanding addition to our township. They're doing wonderful things there in the north end of the mall, and we really appreciate all their efforts. And we were glad that our EDC could help them out a little bit during the pandemic, and that they survived that horrible time. So thank you very much. Okay, we now have a citizen survey presentation from the Cobalt Community Research that helped us put together this year's survey and going out to the citizens with it.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is well. I'm going to be sharing my screen so you can follow along with me as we go through. The survey results are very positive, so I think you'll be very encouraged as those come through. Let me first make sure that you're able to see the screen. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Slideshow start. There we go. So just as a reminder, Cobalt, we are a 501c3 not-for-profit. We're based here in Michigan. We work across the country with communities very much like yours on community planning and other kinds of data issues. Study goals. Really, we wanted to support the budget planning, the strategic planning, and policy decisions that you're looking at. Again, coming in and checking those baseline measures to see how you're doing, to make sure you've got a good distribution of services locked in so you can come back and measure progress in the future. Understand if your presumed service experiences are actually accurate in the eyes of your residents, and look to see which experiences residents have that have the most resonance for them, that are the strongest drivers of outcome behaviors like remaining in the community, the recommending to others, and those types of things. So I always like to start by jumping straight to the bottom line. So your score based on the ACSI was a 78. The ACSI goes from 0 to 100, with 100 being a perfect score that no community gets, and 78 is an extremely solid score, as you'll see in a minute when I compare you to some of the benchmarks. There were 5 areas that really had the strongest effect on overall satisfaction and those outcome behaviors that I talked about. And these aren't low scores, these are just the things that are the most highly leveraged in moving your score up or down in the future. Of those 5 areas: Township Services, Community Image, Public Works, Police Services, and Transportation Infrastructure. There were a lot of themes about walking and cycling, school, safety, parks. All of these are things that your community members really value and that they want to make sure continue to stay as a high priority. They would like to see more in the lines of music and art and food events, more diverse kind of events. They would like to get more information on community events and various township projects that are going on, including start dates, end dates, with some of the traffic things and so on. There was a lot of work that we did in the survey looking at broadband, and you have about 66% of your residents supporting a millage for broadband. Currently, they're paying about $90 a month for the service that they have. About 80% support continuation of the deer management program, and there were a number of individuals who also signed up because they're interested in participating in potential future planning workshops, focus groups, and so on. So overall, this is kind of your executive summary. Really solid response from folks, and I think there's some good actionable information that we'll get to in just a minute. Methodology, was a random sample of 1,500 voters. We had really good response, 386 residents. At the time we had to close it. That gives you plus or minus 5%. The question that comes up all the time is that enough of a sample to represent a community of our size? And the answer is yes. For a national survey to get plus or minus 5%, you really only need to have 384 responses. And so you're in a very good place from a statistical standpoint. We did weight the results based on ethnicity just to adjust that because there was a little bit of a skew there. In addition, the survey was open to residents who were not part of the random sample, so that all of those voices could be heard as well. We heard from about 66 residents, so you had a total of 452 responses. So if you had all of those folks back there in the boardroom, it would be a very full room. One of the things that we like to point out from a statistical standpoint is that those folks who are not part of the random sample are not included in the results that I'm going to be going over today. But in the crosstabs, which you probably received, and it's a very dense set of information, there is a row on that so that for every question, you know how the non-sample respondents, how they felt and what their experiences are. So their ideas certainly are not lost in this. I talked a little bit about the crosstabs. And this is a tiny sliver of it if you haven't cracked it open yet, but essentially every survey question in the survey has its own column, and every demographic cohort has its own row. So this is just a couple of areas just to give you a little tiny taste of it. But we add the shading because there's so much when you actually look at the spreadsheet that your eyes can't cross. So the blue shows where the scores are relatively high, and the red shows where the scores are relatively low, so you can kind of draw your eyes to your strengths and relative weaknesses. The other thing is that as you're looking at an individual question and dropping down the row, you can see what are the experiences of these individual cohorts. And also you can see if the experiences are pretty consistent across cohorts. So really, if it's all blue or all pink, regardless of background, people are having pretty similar experiences. If there's some checkering like we have over here in terms of transparency and sharing information, then there's a little bit of a difference in terms of what that perceived experience is. So those are things that you might want to pay a little bit more attention to if this is an area that you wanted to spend time looking at and shoring up. But again, like I said, this is just a quick glance at how that works. The scale that we use for the township questions were from 1 to 6. And so you'll see a lot of these scores, there are very few that drop down below 3. So very solid performance. All right, let's start diving into the results. So I talked about some of the comparability to outside benchmarks. We didn't do this for all the questions, but I wanted to give you some sense of how well you're performing compared to your peers. So your overall score was a 4.9 on that 6-point scale. That translates to a 78 on the American Customer Satisfaction Index. For the nation, for communities, the average is 67, so you are 11 points above the national, and 69 for similarly sized communities. Midwest, you can see what those scores are, 66 and 74, and Michigan, 67 and 64. So you are doing really well overall in terms of the kind of value that you're delivering today. One of the things that we do with all of the questions is we take them and we throw them into this kind of scatter plot. So the perceived performance, so that rating from 1 to 6 is on the vertical. So your relatively higher scoring areas are in the top. Your relatively lower scoring areas are in the bottom. And then we have the impact, the correlation with overall satisfaction plotted across the horizontal. So things that are more over on the right-hand side are the things with a stronger relationship to overall satisfaction. Things that are on the other side have a weaker association with overall satisfaction and all of those outcome behaviors that are tied in with it. So we took all of those questions, we summed them up into categories with these different dimensions, and we plotted them there. And one of the things that I want to point out with the scale is that it starts at a 3. So even your lowest scoring areas still appear close to a 4.2. But we do this when we zero in on the clusters so that you can see the relative differences between each of these areas. So all of your areas performed well, but from a relative standpoint, some areas are stronger than other areas. And again, these are the areas that are on the right that have stronger linkage with overall satisfaction. Things over here on the left-hand side have a weaker correlation with overall satisfaction. One of the questions that always comes up is fire department. So your fire department is doing a fantastic job in terms of the services that they provide, but it's not way over here on this this high impact side. And the reason for that is because we're not measuring importance, we're measuring how closely these are linked to overall satisfaction. And the way to think about this is if you were to buy a car, you're thinking about what are the different attributes that a car has that would help you choose one model from another. It might be the pricing, it might be the safety, it could be the mileage, but it's not whether or not it has a steering wheel. Our steering wheels, are they important? Yes, absolutely, they're super important, but it's not the thing that differentiates one car from another necessarily. And that's really how fire departments are, and I apologize to the fire chief, but the fire is very important, but it's not the thing that helps decide from one area to another in terms of where people live. You can see the other areas. Police, definitely a strong area. You're doing well. It matters a lot. Public Works, which also performed well. Community Image, a little bit softer than Township Services, and we'll get to those a little bit more in a minute. And each of these, I'll be breaking them out into their individual component questions. For the ones over here on the right, I'm not going to hit everything just from time constraints, but you'll have that available in your packet. And once you see me go through this, you'll understand how to read these charts. So first of all, law enforcement. This is an area that I wanted to look at just because of all of the issues that have been going on in the news over the last year. And you can see your scores, well above 5 in most areas, a little bit softer here in the transparency, but overall, really strong scores. On the ACSI scale, this turns into about an 86, which is a very strong score. So your officers are doing a fantastic job. And so they need to be encouraged. What they're doing is appreciated and recognized by the residents of the township. So then what we do is we take each of those bars and we plot them into this scatter chart. So you can see the relative importance, the relative impact of some compared to the others. You can see the transparency and sharing information is the area that the department might want to take more time looking at in terms of what can they do to beef up. It's still a very strong score. So this is definitely a tuning kind of conversation. But this is the relative weakness that matters the most for them in terms of moving that score even higher. Other areas, engagement with the community, response time to emergencies, all fantastic scores, and these are strengths that continue to resonate with your residents. We had a number of questions regarding parks. We asked them how often we use them. They used them in the past year. You can see that only about 14% of your residents did not use your parks and trails at all in the last year. So there's very heavy usage, particularly in this time of pandemic. We had a number of different aspects of the Parks and Recreation programs and facilities that we wanted to rate. Again, on the same scale, you can see a particularly high score for Marketplace on the Green Farmers Market, high score for the Harris Nature Center, high score for Historical Village. It's a little bit softer in terms of the variety of recreational programs, and that's actually something that we've seen across the board with our clients when we're looking back to the last year. Particularly heavy users, they have a certain addiction to recreational programs, and when we had to close things down, they felt that a little bit, but still, it's a very good score. Looking at that scatter chart, things that are really the most closely linked with overall satisfaction, we got the variety of recreational programs, the variety of park amenities, park facility cleanliness, and the quality of park amenities like the trails and playgrounds and so on. And all of these are high in the charts. These are strengths that are continuing to move your score over. They're lifting your overall satisfaction score. Looking at transportation infrastructure, so you can see a very solid score for your pathway systems for biking and walking. CATA had good solid scores. Street service, maintenance, and repair. Everywhere I go in the Midwest, it seems to be the same story, and it's the same for you as well. So streets are definitely a concern to your residents. When we break it into the chart, you can see the one that really crosses the line the furthest, again, the street tree maintenance and care. So that's something that we want to look at. Street service maintenance repair, while it's the lowest score, it actually was not quite as impactful as the tree maintenance. But still, both of these are areas that have a fair amount of impact on them. So you'll want to spend some time looking at ways to continue moving forward on that, and really building the awareness of what you're moving forward on, what the plan is, how the decisions are made, and so on. Looking at public works, strong scores.
Can I stop here for a second?
Particular. Sure.
Could you go back one screen? You've got the horizontal line there drawn at about 4.9 rather than what would be 3.0, which would be the halfway point between 1 and 6. Is the 4.9, why is that used in all your survey results? Is it unique to ours? And the same with the vertical line drawn there about 0.4.
Sure. That's a good question. It is drawn in different places based on which particular client we're working with. And this is based on when we draw the cluster of all of your questions. So we have a scatter plot with, 80 some different questions on there. This is the center point of where all of those questions fall. And then we lock them in the same place. So as we're going through all of these slides, you can see the relative importance in terms of where each of these areas show up based on that same kind of crossroads there in the middle.
Okay, so you're using that same cross point for every one of these scatter point grids.
That's correct. Yep. So if you're here, same cross point.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. So Public Works. Ease of paying township utility bills, very high score in terms of the respectful treatment of residents, good customer service, drinking water quality very high, stormwater and drain maintenance, lower score, and I know that you've had some issues here in the past. So I think that shows up here in this particular survey. And then the snow management on trails and pathways also is a little bit of a softer score too. When we look here, it's really the stormwater drain maintenance that has the most impact from a negative standpoint, that's pulling the score down the most for this group. But areas that you're doing particularly well is response time to emergencies, the respectful treatment of residents, treatment of residents, and the customer service levels that are provided are definitely strengths that are lifting the scores. Township Services, sort of a general catch-all category. Plan review, very strong scores. A number of things that are kind of cut across here at the 4.5 line, a little bit weaker with your rental inspections and the code enforcement, property maintenance for your neighborhood. And when we drop into the crosstabs, you can see that both the rental inspections and the code enforcement, property maintenance in the neighborhood, both were the low scoring areas, and they were over here on the right. And I think there's a little bit of a concern about the township continuing to stay on top of blight type of issues. So that shows up here. We had some open-ended questions in the survey, and what we do with those is we take all of those comments and we drop them into a word cloud software, and we look at the word counts and which ones come up the most often, and that's tied in with the size of the words. And you had lots of comments. The three words that really came out the most that represented different themes were affordable, walkability, and incentives in terms of what would make Meridian Township a better place for businesses. Around affordable, just the cost of rent continues to go up, taxes and those kind of things that are always a challenge in terms of maintaining profitability, particularly in tax building. Walkability, strong theme throughout the survey. People just want to have more walking paths. They want to have more bike lanes. They want to have that whole infrastructure continuing to be emphasized and developed and maintained. And then incentives from a business standpoint, tax incentives and those kind of things are always welcome. I don't know if either of these communities are in the National Main Street Program, but that's something that you might want to think about as well in terms of managing some of those types of approaches. Looking at what barriers prevent residents from participating more in events going on downtown or make them more likely to not be in the community 5 years from now. Again, an open-ended question. Lots of comments about this that you can read on your own. But the main themes were age, time, and tax. So age, you have a cohort of residents that just feel that the events and things that are going on just don't really aren't as accessible for them as they could be. So as you think about the menu of things that are offered, that's one consideration to put into it. Time, this is a typical thing. People have a lot on their plate. And then from a tax standpoint, a number of folks mentioned that they are thinking about moving just from a tax perspective. So it's not just specifically Meridian Township, they're actually looking at moving out of state. What What kinds of cultural events would they be interested in? Well, music, arts, and foods, particularly things that have a little bit of an ethnic angle to them. So you can see lots of different ideas, and as you guys start going to that phase of your planning, it's a fun set of comments to go through. There's a lot of creativity. Looking at the community image, safe place to live, very strong score for an enjoyable place for children, and enjoyable place for older adults, a safe place to bike and walk. So those are all great things to do well. A couple of areas that were a little bit softer, a great place to have a business, that came in a little bit lower than I think what you'd like to see. Enjoyable place for young adults, a little bit softer also with a physically attractive, great curb appeal. This ties in with some of those concerns regarding code enforcement and rental inspections. So those are the things that really jumped out to me as I was looking at some of these overall scores. Looking at the scatter plot, we can see that the ones that are kind of the most loaded in terms of opportunity to drive your score higher, community that's scoring responsibility, you can see that here, and that's often the communications opportunity to talk more about that. A great place to have a business, physically attractive, great curb appeal is here. The perfect community for me is pretty much on the line, so it's not really so much of a detractor. Enjoyable place for people to visit is over here, right here on the edge. As far as two strengths, it's the enjoyable place for children and older adults. So those are things to put on the bumper stickers in terms of things that people really do love about the community and what they see about it. What do you like most about living in Meridian Township? Well, first of all, safety. That came through loud and strong. Parks. You've got a bunch of park addicts in the township. They love it. They love the walking. They love the amenities. They love all of those kind of things. There were some concerns about access for people with disabilities, so that's something that you'll want to take a look at. And schools. You know, you've got a great educational system over there in that particular area. So that was certainly recognized and was a big reason that people come and like people stay. Top improvements to prioritize. Diversity, you can see that popping up here. People just want that to continue to be an area of attention, not only in terms of the events that we talked about before, but also in terms of entertainment options and some of the different types of businesses downtown, just to get more of that variety, to get a little bit more of that ethnic representation going on. Roads, well, like a lot of places, improved road conditions, but also expanded bike lanes and traffic enforcement came up quite a bit around the roads. The sidewalks, people want to have more sidewalks, and they want to make sure that they are well lit. How do you prefer to receive information? Emails number one, Prime Magazine, Township website. These vary by some of the different demographic groups, so as you're looking at some of the communication efforts, you'll want to dig into that detail, but those are your big three. What kind of information do they want? Well, number one is community events. So that continues to show up over and over throughout the survey. Township projects, what's going on? When do things start? When are things going to be wrapped up? Then other kinds of township news, what's going on? We wanted to find out a little bit more about what languages are spoken in the home. And while English was the number one thing that came up on it, you can see there's a great variety of languages that are spoken. So again, that just reflects, you know, that interest in diversity and multicultural opportunities within the township. We had a number of questions on internet providers. You see that Comcast was the number one provider in the township, followed by AT&T, and then you've got a handful of folks that show up on the radar, but not very much. It's really a Comcast market. We asked, what are they paying currently? The average cost is $110, and the median is $90. And for those of us who blocked out our stats classes in high school and college, the average basically is, you know, it's just the mean, looking at all of the costs and averaging them across, dividing by the number of people that responded. But you can have outliers, so some folks that pay a very large sum can kind of shift that average higher than it otherwise would have been if everything was clustered evenly. The median is really the center point. So if you take all of those scores and you find out the center point of that distribution, that's the median, which tends to be more representative. We asked them what is the fair cost of internet service? So the median came out to around $50. And what's the maximum that they would be willing to pay for service from the township? And that came up to about $60. And again, you know, half are above and half are below, and you want to look at the demographics of what those groups look like. But that gives you a good sense for where some of that pricing could, and at least where the conversation would start. You support a millage for broadband. You can see that well over 65% of the folks say yes. So there's definitely an appetite. What kind of services to see in line? Well, events. They want to see more communication on what's coming along, consistent with some of those earlier questions on what they would like to be informed about. Maybe the town hall meetings broadcasting as well on that, or at least some additional advertising about events that are coming up, the township meetings, and what the topics are going to be. People would like to do their bill payments without a service charge, and also some additional things that they could pay on using some of the online utilities. And for utility services themselves, I think people felt the current bill payment process was a little bit clunky, and so taking a look at that to see if there's some simplification that could be done. We asked about township services that are most important to the household. The big three are what we see all the time: fire and ambulance, police services, road maintenance, and then we've got a number of things that are kind of the second place areas. So township parks, trails and pathways, and then public water and sewer for your next set of services. We asked them what kind of community amenities they would like to see added or improved. There are a number of things that were spread out. And you can see the number one thing, really, again, the walking and biking trails came out. Number two was sidewalks. You can see the pop-up pedestrian spaces also came up here with about 30% of your response. So then there were some very specific kinds of ideas that were floated across for the residents to consider. And you can see that improved broadband access was the number one thing. Over 50% were interested in that, and also expanding and enhancing the trails and pathways. So those were your big two. A couple of close contenders were expanding the solar and other green initiatives, and then investing in upgrading and modernizing the water and sewer facilities. And then the last question, do you support the deer management program? And overwhelmingly over 80% said yes, they do. People realize that there's some real safety issues as well as issues with the health of the herd. Okay, so that was the lightning tour of the results. Just to orient it to you, I believe you all have copies of the presentation, of the crosstabs, of the comments. So there's hours and hours of reading enjoyment ahead of you as you start diving into that, if you haven't done so yet. But before you digest, do you have any questions now that would be helpful for me to answer while you got? I either amazed you or I put you all into a coma.
Question. I have a question. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay. So I was just wondering, the 18 to 24 group was kind of a solid lower score, and the 25,000 or less was kind of a solid lower score. What should we do about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the recommendations that we have in terms of a planning approach to kind of take this data and turn it into action, it's kind of a modified dummy cycle. But you've done the measurements first of all, so you've identified some of the areas that you want to change before you survey again. So you've identified the priorities. Probably the first thing is to break up into small groups, so leadership and some of the staff that could be most effective with that, and start brainstorming with a couple of flip charts. And there's really two questions that each of these groups would want to wrestle with. Number one, what can we do to bring the score up? Just pure brainstorming, get all this listed out. And then the second question would be, what are the things that would move the needle the most? So putting a priority on those. Then you expand the conversation out. So instead of having those little small groups, you have some wider groups that maybe include a lot of line staff, maybe bringing in some of the folks who said they would like to participate in work groups and focus groups, have those folks in and say, these are some of the scores that we really wanted to focus on moving up for these particular demographic groups. Number one, here's our list and what's missing on the list. That way they have the opportunity to elaborate on that. And then number two, again, what would make the most difference? What are the things, the 2 or 3 things that you think would matter the most? Then from all those conversations, you decide, these are the specific initiatives that we want to go after. What are the tools? What are the skills that staff need to be able to execute on these particular concerns? Whether it's doing more Instagram. If Instagram is something that you don't do too much at this time, maybe more YouTube kind of things. So under the manhole covers, going out behind the scenes of the township. There's a lot of interesting things that are done that people would be very interested in following. And YouTube in particular is a very strong tool for those particular cohorts. Just looking at the kind of media that you're using, and then looking at what are the stories that are most interesting to them to really tie into their values, frame it, and then create some events that really tie into their values and frame it. So all of those kind of things go into that training and skills and tools thing that staff need to have, and then you put it into a project plan. So what are your deliverables? What's the timing of rolling each of these things out? How are you going to measure success? And then at some point coming back in 2 or 3 years, measuring it again, to see if you've made progress. So that's the long answer in terms of ways to think about approaching it. So for me, I think the idea of the festivals, so the gentleman with the check presentation just before you, that is a fantastic way of engaging in the cohorts. I'm involved with the economic development over here in Charlotte, Michigan. I was around and helped set up the Michigan Nordic Fire Festival. Again, just some dumb little festival that we would have fun with. And it's grown to about 10,000 people, drawing folks in from across the country, and it's really that age cohort that we were just talking about. So coming up with some of these ideas, getting the word out and the kind of communication channels they use, framing it based on their values with images that kind of reflect them and their values, those are the things that will really help resonate with those cohorts.
Anyone else? I can't see the whole, oh, there's a hand of Phil? That's all?
Thank
Okay.
you. And thank you, William, for the presentation. You covered a lot of material there very well. I think we've got some really good information here that we can use as we put together our goals for the 2022. I think maybe a combined study session in early November where we study this up close, and then at the same time use that to begin to outline what our goals are for 2022. Because it gives us a pretty clear outline for what our residents think is important, and great starting point for putting together our goals.
There's a lot of rich information that you did a great job sharing.
Anybody else have any comments or questions they want to ask?
Dan has his hand up.
Who does?
Dan.
Okay, go ahead, please.
William, I was just wondering if you could address a few questions on page 45, which is the broadband cost analysis. So on this table that you have, so the headings, current cost, we're just asking the resident how much they are currently paying for broadband internet, correct?
Correct.
So it's self-reported data. And then fair cost, for fair cost, we're just asking them what they believe to be the fair market value?
That's correct.
And then
So
maximum
it's not necessarily
cost?
fair market value, but what they would be willing to pay.
Okay, even though they're paying twice that, but at maximum cost, what is the context for that?
Correct. Yep.
Sorry, that was a question. Maximum cost, what are we asking them there?
So maximum cost, we have specifically, what is the highest monthly fee you would be willing to pay for this type of service?
Okay. So that's the highest
So if you were
they're,
to think of, yeah.
so that's the highest they're willing to pay, fair
Plot these out,
cost.
and it would give you basically a space that the pricing would be somewhere between, I'm thinking between 50 and 60 is most likely if you wanted to maximize the number of people participating. But again, these are middle points. So if, from a modeling standpoint, to pay the cost of developing the program, if you needed to charge more, then you might only get, instead of half of your population, you might get a smaller percentage. So that just needs to go into the modeling, and I'm sure that the company that you're looking at working with it can do a lot more with that in terms of modeling out what likely participation would be.
Okay, Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, any other board members?
Courtney has her hand.
Other? Ms. Lozinski.
Thank you. Quick question. So, and I may have missed this. I was going through, but I'm looking at our packet, William. Did we miss discussing facility and grounds and economic health? And I ask because our economic health might need a little of attention.
They are in your packet. I didn't go over them because they were lower correlated areas, and I wanted to be mindful of how much you have on the agenda. But yes, you have those in the packet, and you can see the individual bar charts for each of those, and then the scatter charts, so you can see each of the questions within those areas and those dimensions, and you can see which are the ones that are most closely correlated, more weakly correlated. You're correct that I didn't talk about them, but they are included in the information.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Phil, again?
Yes, I'm glad Trustee Opsner brought up page 45, which is the internet cost, because that came up. And William, I'd like to ask you about the accuracy of what people report here. And the reason I mention that is I just cut the cord from my cable, and I thought I was paying about $100 a month for internet. But when I got rid of the whole package and just got internet from Comcast, the cost was $65 a month. It wasn't $100. So, but if you'd asked me beforehand how much of my $200 bill was I paying for internet, I would have said, oh, at least $100. So I guess in terms of self-reporting, what do we know about how accurate that data that people report back to us is?
Yeah, you should take it with a certain grain of salt. This is to help inform the decision, but it's generally the package. People think about what they're paying to Comcast, regardless of what else is included with their package. I think some people might have, some people did differentiate the cost for each of the individual areas, but most of them, what's the check going out the door? That's what they're looking at.
It's certainly worth further study to see how accurate, or what that cost would be across the township. But I think people may be estimating high because Comcast forces you into that triple play package where you've got to buy cable, phone, and internet, and you easily get a $200 phone bill from Comcast without much effort at all.
I think there's some frustration with Comcast in general.
Okay. Yes, Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Syka. My recollection, Treasurer DeShane, is that the industries want, on average, everyone to pay $150 a month. That's their goal, is that the average customer is paying $150 a month. And then just a question about the survey. For the age group, was it 18 to 25? Was that the age group?
I believe so.
Yeah. That you had on here?
1824.
Was there any kind of response from them about broadband and internet and what would attract them to this area cost-wise? Anything like that, or any comments from that age group?
We didn't break the comments down by the age group. Within the crosstabs, there is some feedback on like support for the internet and that kind of thing, and who they're currently using. But both of those cohorts are also smaller response areas, so a little bit soft in terms of the statistical validity within each of those cohorts. But yeah, there is some information on if they want it or not, and certainly there's 74% say yes, they support the millage for the 18 to 24-year-olds. We've got 81% for the 25 to 34-year-olds, so very strong support there.
And then what about small businesses when they said they would like bigger breaks and that kind of thing? Did they respond at all about broadband or access or incentives in that regard?
It's again a pretty small group. There's only about 5% owner-operated a business. We can run a crosstab for the businesses. We didn't include them as a demographic group. We can easily do that. That would add value to. You can see for all of the elements of the survey, how do they rate regarding service satisfaction and and all of the different experiences that they're having. That would be a pretty easy thing to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And would you be charging us for that?
No. Maybe charging beer, so I'll charge Amber for a tall, rocky one.
Well, that might be good information for you to provide for us, then, Mr. Smith.
Happy to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? And the picture is small, so you can help me again, Deborah, if you see anybody.
I don't. Pat.
Trustee
I
Jackson.
think Pat.
Go ahead.
Just one quick question. Do you have any analysis or comments on the relationship between the responses you got from the official survey group and the online survey results?
We didn't break the comments apart by cohort. So the comments are typically not statistical anyways. They're more qualitative to help you understand why people responded the way they did from a statistical standpoint. I could break it apart if that would be valuable. I can put together a list of the comments for the non-sample cohort because we do have that information. So the folks.
I would like to see.
I think it's good to have all the information we can get.
Okay, I can certainly do that for you.
All right, you're still on, Courtney.
One thing that was somewhat surprising to me, and maybe because I've been involved, there was quite a bit of, I wouldn't say negative, but needs for improvement with parks and trails. And knowing that we've got over 1,800 acres of parks and 25 miles of trails, I'm going to assume based on some of the information that might have to do with downtown walkability, but is there more information we can get regarding what people are looking for in our parks and trails?
As you go through the comments themselves, you'll see more of the comments of the parks in terms of the context of what they said, and I think that'll give you a lot of that kind of information. The other thing that immediately jumps to mind, I'm scrolling through the screen, so that I'm kind of glancing off in a strange direction. That's why I'm doing it. I'm just pulling up got spot. But if I recall, your scores from a statistical standpoint, for Parks and Rec, were all very strong scores. So while there might have been some comments about things that people would like to see improved, overall, you're getting everything. Your worst score is a 5 on a 6-point scale. So you did really well. So the comments are really designed more to, again, help polish the kind of experience that they're having rather than saying, there's something that you're lacking.
Thank you.
Supervisor Syka. Derek, how many staff, I noticed one of the questions was about the maintenance of the sidewalks and trails. I know sometimes people get confused in neighborhood sidewalks and what the township's supposed to oversee. How many staff members do we have to do the snow and that kind of thing for the, I think Courtney said we have 25 miles of trails.
So in the Department of Public Works, there's 24 employees. We're kind of divided up. So 8 of them are assigned to water, 6 are assigned to the parks, 4 are assigned to the sewer, and then we have 2 mechanics. I think that gets me to my count. There's 2 in buildings and grounds too. So that's kind of how everyone's divided up. But on activities like snow plowing of the pathways, that typically it's all hands on deck kind of thing. When the parking lots need to be plowed, people are assigned priorities, but overall, we have a pool of 24 employees to make that work happen.
Do you think some of those comments about the maintenance of sidewalks is maybe not necessarily sidewalks that the township maintains? Is there confusion or?
Well,
I'm sure that also roads.
Yeah, potentially.
There's often confusion about roads.
Right. And some of those areas, we should point out too, the services are not provided by the township. There's a question about street tree maintenance, maintenance of the roads. We do have our local road program, but that is a county function. Stormwater maintenance, that's county function too. So I think it's important to know what those indicators are so we can talk to our partners at the county level and express those opinions of the community. But in regards to the pathway maintenance, you could speculate that, right? If you're on a pathway, the township plows that sidewalk. If it's a sidewalk in a subdivision, that's the homeowner's responsibility. And you have, like in any neighborhood, in any town across the United States that has snow, a good portion of your residents are probably out there shoveling after the first inch hits that sidewalk. But then you always have those residents that either can't take care of the sidewalk or just have better things to do and would rather, not shovel their sidewalk. So there's probably some frustration with that from some of the residents because it couldn't be hit and miss on the neighborhood sidewalks. But again, it's a lot of speculation.
We have 1,000 acres of parks, 1,000 acres of land preserves, and we have about 85 to 90 miles of pathways.
85 to 90, did you say?
That's what he said. Yeah, and again, I'm sure that a lot of those statements with regard to snow shoveling, et cetera, it's just confusion as to who's responsible for what. I picked up on that as you were going through the results, for example, in the sewers and other things that aren't really our responsibility if people don't know that. But as Derek said, I think it's very wise to use that information to go to the providers, whether it's the county or whoever, and explain to them our needs.
It's a very strong place to have that conversation.
Yeah, gives us good information to use. Okay. Anything else from anyone? For some reason, I don't have a picture anymore of everybody.
I just had one other final thought. So on page 30, on page 32, this is the business themes and focusing on creating a better place for small businesses. And so the themes that were extrapolated are themes that really assimilate to the conversation that we've had on downtown Okemos. So one is affordability. The community is expressing a desire for lower rents for business spaces specifically. They also express a desire for lower taxes for local business owners, but the tax rate is the tax rate across all manner of property. We aren't allowed to differentiate between one parcel or another when it comes to the tax rate. But I thought that first reflection on rents was interesting because we've had a lot of conversation on the rent market rate as it relates to the Village of Okemos. Walkability, obviously, I think that's an indicator of, they're looking at those walkable nodes, the 3 PICA areas predominantly. And then also the linkage between tax incentives and expanding space for downtown storefronts. So I felt like that mirrored the conversation that the subcommittee has been having with the Village of Okemos, and I would encourage the Village of Okemos folks to take a look at that because I think it really drives home the point that the community has been making about the need for a vibrant downtown that offers something for everyone, which is the commercial space. The residential is a perfectly fine use, but for having the viable commercial space, which gets at the rent factor or the market rate if you were going to sell it, that gets to viability and whether or not businesses will actually locate. So that was the one thing that stuck out the most to me. Thank you.
Any other comments? Are we done with this? Okay, we want to thank you, Mr. Santamore, for all the hard work and for the results and the good report on the results. Thank you very much. And we look forward to receiving the additional information we mentioned today, and we'll be thinking of you as we pour through these data. I mean, there's enough here to spend quite a few, not just hours, days, and perhaps months looking at. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, we're ready now to go on to citizens addressing agenda items and non-agenda items. Mr. Davies, do we have any citizens? Well, first, I can't see. Is there anyone in the room that at this time?
There are people in the room, sir. We have one person attending via Zoom who is welcome to use the raise hand feature if they'd like to make a public comment. I don't know if we have any green sheets at this time or not.
If no one in the room wishes to make a public comment first?
I think we have someone wishing to make a public comment.
Please, when you come up, you're limited to 3 minutes. Give your name and address, and try to keep your comments to pertinent matters and address them to the whole board, not to individuals or comment on other individuals who aren't part of the board.
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. I'm Charles Barbier. I'm here again on behalf of the Pond Cooperative Homes, Inc., which has requested historically that the township petition for the Daniels Drain project. You have a resolution in item 12C this evening. We are here to indicate our support and appreciation for the township's willingness to participate in this project at the 50% level, which is indicated in the proposed resolution. We look forward to the opportunity to have some further discussion on the allocation of the remaining 50%, and we understand that future proceedings and hearings will be held for that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that's in the room want to comment?
We have a Frank Fugay. Fugay.
Good evening. I'm Frank Fugate, 500 South Front Street, Columbus, Ohio. I'm here to, if there's any questions tonight on item number 13, board discussion, special use permit 2119-121 Woodward Way Limited Dividend Housing Association. So if there's any questions, I'm here to answer them, and thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
We have a card.
Any others?
Yeah, we have a card from Mr. Jim Williams. I don't know if you want to speak now or at the end. It's up to you. Or both.
Yeah, there are two opportunities now and one at the end of the meeting.
I can speak now.
We can do one or both.
Just at one, just now. The Daniels Drain project is...
You're going to start out with your name and address first, please.
Oh, my name is Jim Williams at 4332 Arbor Drive in Okemos, Michigan, 48864.
Thank you.
Okay. I understand that the Daniels Drain project started in 2015. At that time, I was told that the two drains that are on the street next to my house were the Shoals Drain and the Forest Hills Drain. So in 2015 and 2016, I thought that this didn't apply to me. Then I got this notice about the Daniels Drain project, and I called the drain commissioner and found out that, yes, I'm in the Shoals Drain, I'm in the Forest Hills Drain, I'm in the Daniels Drain, and the Cornell Woods Drain. My question to you is, how far can we take this? Every time you connect something to this drain, my taxes go up. And they keep going up. And they have been for the last 40 years. And I'm just here to say that I need to know who I talk to about how you apportion these drains. Because the two drains on my lot, not even on my lot, on the street, aren't 100% on each one. Each one gets 50%, but that's not true either, because the driveway is about 1/4 for the one drain and 2/3 go into the other drains. So who do I talk to? How do we figure out how much I should pay?
Well, just so you know, we don't dialogue with comments during this period. However, we will see that you get your answer.
Thank you.
Mr. You can provide the answer later.
And then we have one more from Cecilia Kramer.
Yes, good evening. My name is Cecilia Kramer, 4560 Oakwood here in Okemos, and I'm also the president of the Forest Hills Homeowners Association, speaking on the Daniels Drain resolution for this evening. And I just wanted to say I wanted to echo the comments heard earlier from Mr. Barbieri, the attorney for the ponds, condominiums. And just as a public comment, the gentleman before me should contact the Ingham County Drain Commissioner about the apportionment of the drains on his property. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. Do we have another one?
We do. We started a trend. Glenda, Story?
Yeah. I'm Gwenda Story, 4526 Marlboro, and I want to echo Cecilia's comments and your comments. It's great to hear you guys being so cooperative and concerned about the residents and what we're paying. And can I get this thing off? I just appreciate the consideration that you're showing the citizens, particularly citizens like myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda. Are there others?
I don't see any more. I don't see any more. No.
Mr. Davies, do we have anybody virtually?
There are no virtual hands at this time, sir.
Okay, no phone calls?
We are not set up for phone calls this evening, sir.
I see, okay, thank you. We're going to go on to the Township Manager's report. I know Mr. Walsh is with us virtually, and ask him to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Good evening, Board. First of all, I want to thank Director Clark. The survey was a very involved project and had many steps to it, and I want to thank her. And I also thought this is my third survey, like the supervisor, my third survey that I've seen since I've been on as manager, and I know he is on the board. And I will tell you that from my perspective, tonight's was the best presentation and the best information I've seen from a survey for the township. We have a meeting, 2 meetings this week, one with Consumers Energy about the power lines, another one with a developer who's looking at the 16 acres up at the Hazard Village Square next to what we hope will be Pine Village. Tomorrow, you've been following the prevailing wage policy the township has tomorrow that will be litigated in front of Judge Kennedy. The Deer Management Program, 7,500, 38 properties, starts October 1, and the police department will take over January 2nd. The IT infrastructure, we have selected who we want to move forward with, and we will be bringing that contract and all the details to you for the infrastructure investment that we want to make, and we'll be bringing that to you on October 5th. Look for the website to be unveiled on November 15th, and soon the board will be getting together at the supervisor's direction to discuss the ARP funding and what the board wants to move forward with that. There's other things, but I know you have a long agenda tonight, Mr. Supervisor, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any questions for Mr. Walsh from board members? And if maybe someone can help me if anybody in the room has a question, because your picture is very small on my screen.
No hands.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will now go on to board member reports of activities and any announcements the board members may have. I can see everyone. I see Mr. Opsimer. Yes, sir.
Yes, I just wanted to report for the board that the state budget will be passing tomorrow. It's Senate Bill 82, if anybody wants to reference it. And Meridian Township is receiving a $225,000 grant for a new fire truck that we will be needing to acquire in the 2023 budget, I believe. So roughly that would be approximately half the cost. Our previous truck from 2015 was $425,000. And of course, we're seeing cost increases, so that will be coming through in the budget beginning October 1st. And that
Well,
concludes
thank
my
you,
report.
former treasurer and current state representative Julie Blixey, and you and everyone else who's involved in that. Thank you very much. Any other board members? Okay, announcements or? I don't see any. Is Miss? I see the clerk. Yes.
Hate to go after Dan. What's that exciting news?
Yeah, it's a hard act to follow.
But I'll try. I attended the ribbon cutting ceremony for the expansion of high caliber karting, and the new facility is phenomenal. So I just want to commend them for all the work that they're doing, and all the work that Amber is doing with them and other businesses in the community. It was a well-attended event, and it was super fun, great new spot for people to go to. They said it's one of the largest indoor activity parks or something like that, one of the largest in the world. Isn't that crazy? It's awesome. So anyway.
On this side of the Mississippi, I guess now it's expanded to the world. All right.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to go there. I also attended the John Grettenberger Memorial Day service. It was well attended. It was well done. It was very touching to hear everyone speak such kind words about John and his contribution to the community and his love for the historical village. So that was a really well done event. So kudos to the Friends of Historic Meridian for putting that together and working with the Parks Department on that. We're voter registration month. Not as exciting as the fire truck, but it's voter registration month. So we're basically doing voter registration guides. So if anybody hears this and they want to encourage others to register to vote, they can come into our office. They can check their status online. There is a organization, I think they're called the National Center for Voter Information, and they have sent letters across the nation to people. Those letters look like they're from the clerk's office, but they're not. So if anyone at home receives these letters, if they look at the letter and read it, probably in fine print on there that it's from the voters, the Center for Voter Information organization. We're not working with them. Anybody can go online. If they get that letter, just go online, see what your status is on the Secretary of State Voter Information website, and you can just throw the letter away. If they want, they can contact our office. We're happy to answer questions. We've had a lot of phone calls about it yesterday and today, and so we've been trying to put some information out about it. But they're not trying to scan people's information or anything like that. It's just an organization trying to get people to register to vote. And then I also attended the Universal Access Advisory Board meeting last week. There were a lot of great ideas from community members on there. It was a really well done meeting. I was really surprised at all the great comments. Things you would never think of. So that was really good. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the Parks Department does with that information, especially in conjunction with the survey results that we heard about accessibility and stuff like that. So I have a few other things that I've attended and done, but I won't bore you all. Most importantly, I met with Cecilia Kramer, who's a member of Faith Lutheran Church, and we looked at that facility as a future location to move two precincts out of elementary schools. It's our goal to move out of elementary schools in Okemos and in Hazlet, and so it looks like It looks like it could work. Really nice facility over there, and so I'm very appreciative of her time and Faith Lutheran's time in looking at that with our office. And I'll stop there.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other board members, and again, if you're in person, just kind of speak out. I mean, I can't quite see you very well, so. Oh, now I can see you. Mr. Lewinsky, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to update that we had an electronics recycling event last Saturday from 9 to 2. And wanted to thank our volunteers. There was quite a few residents. There's some in the seats today, as well as a tremendous amount of students, staff, board members, and commissioners. It was very well prepared. It was a very smooth process, and I stood at the end for a while to check people out or to say goodbye, and most every resident was so grateful that we have that. And I know not all communities have that, so I just wanted to put out a thank you to those who organized that.
Yes, I'll just mention that my family, who were donors to that, my wife commented how easy it was to do it. She was very pleased at how well it went. And I also want to mention, I attended the Chamber East Lansing Meridian, business type meeting that we have every month. And I brought it up there, and one of the things that was asked is, do you have to be a resident of Meridian? I said, no. If you've got electronic stuff to recycle, bring it in. So hopefully the word was getting around. Treasurer, you had your hand up.
Just one quick announcement. This Sunday is the Autumn Classic, which is a walk run around Lake Lansing, leaving from Lake Lansing Park North. If you haven't done the Autumn Classic before, it is a delightful event, and it benefits Area 8 Special Olympics. It's for a great cause, and there's usually 1,000 or so walkers and runners, and you can register online or go to Playmakers. It's a wonderful local event, and it benefits a great charity, and nothing quite like a walk around Lake Lansing on a crisp September morning. So I encourage all residents who haven't done it before to give it a try this Sunday at Lake Lansing Park North.
Okay. Anyone else? I mentioned I also attended a MSU Institute for Public Policy session talking about the population census numbers that came in for Michigan and for mid-Michigan, and the effects on redistricting. And it's a rather fascinating subject, and unfortunately none of us know where it's going to end up. The commission is still working hard on it, and there's been different rumors out there, different things published in newspapers, et cetera, but we really don't know at this point. But Michigan is losing a congressperson, as we know. But not as fast as other areas. Anyone else? I thought I saw a hand. Yes, Ms. Guthrie.
I just want to make a quick announcement. The farmers market on Wednesday, they still are having their concerts, and Showdown will be there from 6 to 8. And it's tons of fun.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the survey it talked about needing more music, but we have the band shell, we have the thing up at Lake Lansing, that band shell also. We have the farmers market. There's a lot of areas where we do that kind of stuff, but I guess it's just not widely known. Okay. And also, of course, we haven't been able to Celebrate Meridian now for a couple of years thanks to COVID, which would certainly qualify as something to bring the community together. Anyone else? If not, we'll move on. We got a lot to do. We've come to approval of the agenda. Does someone want to make a motion?
I move the approval of the agenda as presented.
Support.
Supported by Ms. Jackson, I believe?
Yes.
Yeah. Then I guess we'll have to do this roll call because of the way we're set up today.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Jackson?
Yes.
Trustee Opsimer?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Yes. Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Supervisor Stika?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, we will now move on to the consent agenda, which has a large number of items. The communications, as always, the minutes from the September 7 regular meeting, the bills, which need approval, the outdoor gathering permit, Friends of Historic Meridian Blue and Gray event, something they've been doing for many years. I don't know about during COVID, but I know they've been doing it for many years. It's a fun event. Resolution of declaration and notice for the LWCF Gateway Path and Restroom Project. The resolution of declaration and notice for the MNRTF Central Meridian Regional Trail Connector. The assistance to the firefighter grant and safer grant. Those are good money coming in, and we appreciate that, Chief. Ratification of the new full-time paramedic, firefighter, and part-time paramedic. And finally, a change recommended by the clerk and myself. We had our regular board meeting set for November 4th, Thursday, instead of the usual Tuesday because of potential election. There is no election, so the item would change it back to the Tuesday, which would be the 2nd, I believe. Right? Did someone want to make a motion? Mrs. Jackson?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Support.
Okay. Ordered by Ms. Wozinski, I believe. All right. Any need to pull the minutes off or anything? If not, we need to vote.
Trustee Optimer?
Yes.
Trustee Jackson?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes. Yep.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Supervisor Sykoff?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Yes. And Trustee Wozinski?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Today we have no questions for attorney. We have hearings. Two of them. The first one is on the Silverstone Estates street lighting, SAD number 427. And this is an opportunity for the public to make. We'll discuss this later on in the meeting as a board. But right now is the opportunity for the public to make comments, and I will open the public hearing at 7:14. Would anybody like to come forward, or if you're not on site, to come virtually to the meeting and make comment on the Silverstone Estate street lighting SAD? Well, maybe we should have Mr. Perry explain it. That might help get people's interest. Mr. Perry?
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity, Supervisor Stika. Members of the board, back at your September 7th meeting, you authorized the creation of a special assessment district to pay for the operations of street lights in the new Silverstone Estates subdivision. There are 7 LED lights. The first year cost would be $69.29 per lot. Trying to see, I think trying to remember how many lots there were. 22, thank you, because the full 25 are not being assessed because they don't receive a benefit from the street light, direct benefit. And then the second year essentially is just the annual operating costs. So if people wanted to budget, that's kind of where that assessment would fall in, a little over $31. So of course, anytime any energy supplier passes along an increase, we increase our assessments to correlate with that. So we recover 100% of those energy costs for these special assessments.
As a reminder, the township does not provide street lighting. Instead, it has to be done in this way by the residents who are affected. Again, anybody want to come forward and comment on this? If not, we'll close the public hearing at 7:60. Public hearing, this one on the 2021 order to maintain sidewalks, SAD number 19, and we will open the hearing at 7:16 and have Mr. Perry tell us about it.
So again, this is a special assessment district. This is for our order to maintain program. As was seen earlier in the survey, people in our community value pathways and sidewalks. Sidewalks are located within the neighborhoods that are not designated as a pathway on the pathway master plan. And the way that we maintain these public sidewalks is through the special assessment process. Again, at the last board meeting, the first resolution was approved by the board, setting the special assessment up. and now we are following the process we use, which is the Public Act 188 of 1954, which requires 2 public hearings, and tonight would be the first of those.
This is an opportunity. Who's there or wants to participate virtually to come forward, comment on this? Raise questions, whatever.
I did not see any member of the public for this item. However, we did receive a written comment. A resident at 3801 Binghamton Drive had a concern about a sidewalk section that has sunk, and he's concerned that it may be related to some storm infrastructure. So we will investigate that with the resident to determine if it should be included in the special assessment district or not.
Very good. All right, then we'll close this hearing at 7:17. Okay. All right. We're now moving on to our action items. The first one is a big one. It's our 2022 recommended township budget. Tonight to adopt it if we want to avoid what is euphemistically called the truth and taxation hearing and process, which is kind of involved. So hopefully we're going to be able to approve this budget today. We had the presentation at our last meeting in great detail by the township manager and staff. And the township manager made a few changes, and maybe he would like to first comment on what those changes were.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'll be brief. I know that the board's had the budget now for nearly a month, and we've spent the better part of 3 hours going over it, some more than that. The additions from the robust discussion that we had 2 weeks ago would be the additions that were presented to you include 34 firefighter paramedic positions, so that would be a total of 2 additional firefighter paramedics. A solar array with a location to be announced at $100,000, $10,000 for the Environmental Commission for a green project to be determined, and $5,000 for wetland promotion and protection. Total budget just over $57 million, and if approved, when all goes as planned in 2022, we expect a fund balance on December 31 of 2022 of $8.5 million. And then one additional side note I remind you is that this includes a $3.5 million, $350,000 payment for the Daniels drain, and an income of a special assessment of 50% of that for $175,000. That's a recap of the budget, which has taken about 3.5 months from when we started it until tonight. And I'd be happy to answer if there are any remaining questions, Mr. Supervisor, from the board. Thank you.
A tremendous amount of work goes into putting together the budget by the manager and his leadership team, and down to every staff member, as well as the finance office, etc. So, does anyone have anything you want to bring up tonight? This is our chance. And for the people that are there, picture small, hard to see if the hands are raised. So just say your name. I got switched. I can see people now. All right. Yes, Mr. Opsimer.
I move that the Township Board approve the 2022 recommended
Budget resolution.
Support.
Okay, moved by Opsimer, supported by Jackson. Treasurer.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking the manager and Director Madison for their exhaustive work on this budget, and also for the changes that the board had requested 2 weeks ago, having them quickly moved into the current budget. The budget reflects our residents' values. Police and fire are their top priorities, with right behind that are parks and pathways. And if you look at where we're spending our money, it follows those priorities. It's a good budget. We're fortunate in Meridian Township. We have a very solid tax base, and a very high percentage of our taxes are paid on time by our residents, which makes it easier to plan, budget, and expend the money that's required. I think this board should be proud of this budget. It's a good budget. It reflects the goals of this board, and it's a great way to move into 2022. Hopefully, COVID won't be as predominant of a issue as it has been the past 2 years, and we can begin to expand and achieve even more of our goals, including our diversity, equity, and inclusion, do more with parks as our residents have asked for, and make the best use of the ARPA funding in the year ahead. But this is a good budget. I'm glad to be voting in favor of it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Trustee Wazinski.
I also want to thank Manager Walsh, he's on there, Director Madison, for their exhaustive efforts in this, and also for your consideration and commitment to our climate sustainability plan, adding in those really important budget appropriations for solar, green grants, and for wetland education. Also want to thank you for your commitment to our public safety and adding in an additional firefighter paramedic to help to serve our community at its best. So thank you.
Ms. Jackson.
Yes, I'd just like to add my congratulations and thank you to the manager and his staff for the comprehensive budget that they put together and all of the effort that they put in to help me understand and follow what's going on and where the money is going. Thank you.
Trustee Osmer.
I also want to thank Director Madison and Manager Walsh and the entire M team and the department heads for their work on the budget. I also just want to reiterate my comments from the previous meeting as it relates to the IT. I hope Manager Walsh and Director Giebes and the team will bring back additional requests if they're needed. We don't need to have, we don't need lost work productivity due to IT insufficiencies. So if there's additional costs there, I view this very similarly to the expansion of the deer management program. I hope staff and the manager will echo that to the board. So I believe the board will support additional resources that are necessary to support the staff and the operations of the township. And I hope maybe some of the things that we've gleaned from the citizen survey could possibly kind of be wrapped into that IT overhaul too. I know the treasurer's worked with some of those third parties that we contract with, and some of them have some rigidities, in terms of their software and user friendliness. Also, just want to thank the manager and board members for the addition. I think we've made tremendous progress in getting our staffing back up within the fire department, especially given the call volume that we've experienced over the previous decade. I think that will make a tremendous difference in staffing there. My only question, and the manager and I have talked about this, I thought I would just ask. So Manager Walsh, I believe when I read the budget document, when we look at like the payroll, the board is approving payroll for the department, but we don't approve a specific number of FTEs. Am I correct?
No. I think it's important that with transparency and communication that we're all on the same page. And with your approval of this budget, if you approve this budget, specifically, Mr. Trustee, if you're referring to the fire department, you're approving 34 FTEs and 41 FTE for the police department, if that answers your question.
Okay, so just to expand on that, so does the budget cap you from an HR perspective of going above those totals of full-time positions, if it doesn't impact, if there's still payroll allotted for it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, to answer that question directly, if let's say in February I made the decision we need a 35th firefighter paramedic, I have the ability to do that, but again, going back to communication and transparency, I would bring that back to the board as a budget amendment before implemented to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Okay. So just one thought that I've had as I was mulling it over, just to put it out there for food for thought for everybody, because we've dealt with significant shortages on the police side, and this is a conversation that I had with Manager Walsh on one or two occasions, we're down to 35 officers now, active, and, our ideal staffing, or at least the approved staffing, is 41. So if we're fortunate enough to get there, which I recognize, and I can't begin to imagine the work that's going to go into having to actually get there, but we're short a platoon, and we've seen how the turnover within law enforcement is accelerating. So I would support staff in going above the 41 if we're fortunate enough to get there, so that when we have that next significant loss in staff, we can kind of absorb it, right? So that we don't fall to 35, maybe we fall to 37 or 38 where we used to be falling to. We're falling quite lower just due to the acceleration and turnover. So just one thought that I've been mulling over, and so that's the intent of the question. So thank you again for all the work that's gone into the budget, and I appreciate the additions, and you can bump the fund balance back up another $225,000.
Yeah, well, thank you, and to Representative Rixey for your work on that. That's tremendous news tonight for us, for our fire department, and for our entire community. And I also want to say we had a really great budget when we brought it to you. I think we have just an outstanding budget with the input, what I would say robust input from the board 2 weeks ago. I think we just have an outstanding budget now that's going to benefit all of our 45,000 residents.
Thank you. Clerk.
Supervisor Syka. I too want to thank Director Madison and Manager Walsh, especially the quick turnaround time, meeting some of the requests from the board meeting the last time. I'm becoming concerned. I just kind of want to make the board aware. I'm a little nervous as clerk with the redistricting that's going to be happening, and the amount of work that could be required of the clerk's office. So I'm not asking for an amendment or asking for anything. I'm just kind of putting it out there since we're talking about transparency. We had, in 2010, we had, 2,200 people on our permanent absentee voter list. Today we have over 20,000 people. And we have the same number of people, one person, who our record technician who oversees that. And, we went from 27,000 registered voters to 34,000 registered voters in a 10-year time span. So when we talk about the census, because we had this discussion at the last meeting about the firefighters and having another firefighter on, I went back to look at the numbers. I knew it had increased, but I didn't realize how much it had increased and the workload. And so I am concerned next year with the redistricting and the amount of work that would be required of staff. And Frank and I talked about this a little bit in his office, and I wasn't bringing a staff position here or anything like that, but I just kind of want to raise that awareness that there will be a lot of work required of local clerk's offices across the state, and that's something that we may want to think about.
Okay, thank you. Any other budget comments here before we vote? Or questions? I don't see any hands. Okay, I guess we're ready to vote on the budget. I'm sure Mr. Walsh is pleased with that. Is his staff? Go ahead.
We'll start with the treasurer then. Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Jackson.
Yes.
Trustee Optimer.
Yes.
Trustee Sunland.
Yes.
Yes. Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Supervisor Syka.
Yes.
And Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Trustee Wazinski's masks her voice sometimes as well. Okay. All right, we're going on to 12B, which is the Smart Zone Local Development Finance Authority. We've seen this now several times on our agenda. We've put it on the back burner. It's come back to the front burner. Here it is again. And do we have staff comment on this first? Mr. Walsh, I can't, oh, okay, we do have Amber there. Go ahead, Amber. Director, go ahead.
Good evening, members of the board. Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
All right, perfect. I apologize. Tonight, the request in front of the board regarding the smart zone is to approve the resolution of intent, which is in your packet, and set the date for the public hearing for October 19th to discuss the proposed areas to include in the Lansing Regional Smart Zone. I am here, as well as Tim Dempsey is on via Zoom to answer questions regarding the setup in the smart zone.
And I see Mr. Dempsey, so he certainly is here via Zoom. Okay. Board members, discussion. Or while we wait a motion first, is there going to be a motion? Guthrie.
I move to approve the resolution of intent and set the public hearing for October 19th, 2021.
There's support for that?
Support.
Wait. I'm sorry, who was that? Who was that?
Jackson. Jackson.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Jackson. All right. Ms. Guthrie?
I believe this is an incentive to attract tech companies. I think this would be a good thing for the township to do with regional cooperation, and given the survey results with local businesses, small businesses, other businesses looking for more incentives and looking for the township to work with them. I think that this shows that the township wants to work with businesses, wants to attract businesses, and is interested. Sorry, I haven't eaten today. All I've done is drink water and had lots of coffee, so my tongue is stuck. And the township is interested in having businesses come here and that we want to work with them. And so I believe that this would be good for the township.
There are good places to eat in Grand Rapids. You go to bed. All right. Ms. Jackson, do you want to comment?
I agree with Clerk Guthrie. I find this as a very good opportunity for Meridian Township to work with East Lansing, MSU, and LCC to attract, promote, and support the development of more technologically modern businesses and enterprises to Meridian Township, to not only Meridian Township, but to our region.
Next, Trustee Opsmer, I believe his hand is up.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So I respect the opinions of Trustee Jackson and Clerk Guthrie, and but do have a difference of opinion on this one, on this item. I still struggle to support a TIF when I don't know what the tax increment financing will be financing. I just view this one differently based on the zones, and I don't perceive the two zones to be a priority area in terms of infrastructure for the community. And so I struggle to support a TIF when I lack an understanding of what we would be investing in with those tax dollars, especially when we are looking at such substantial costs with downtown Okemos, including general fund monies being put toward that in addition to the TIF, and also with the looming infrastructure costs that will have to be absorbed at some point by the mall. You know, the bank project that was proposed on Grand River by the mall, that never came back to the board because of concerns that the Drain Commissioner's office raised as it relates to the current conditions of the site and the stormwater management,
and the lack of infrastructure there. And so any redevelopment over there is going to come with great cost to taxpayers in all reality. And it's an area that we can't afford not to prioritize. So I can't support tax capture in these zones without a better understanding of what we're funding and why we're funding it and who the beneficiary is. And my only other concern is also the approval process. So the township is still, we're still new to TIF. We have 3 brownfields. We have our DDA, but we have no real viable capture. And we control the DDA. The Township Board controls funds through the DDA and also through the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. This would be a different ballgame because we would have a different governing body approving the funds. So at this time, I'm not supportive of the what's before us, but would certainly entertain continued discussions on it. But I still feel like the CIA should precede this, and the discussion as to whether or not there should be a tax capture with the CIA based on the priority status for the mall. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Treasurer DeShane.
I too support the work done by Director Clark and appreciate the motion being made by the clerk and Trustee Jackson. I too am going to oppose this for a number of reasons. One is the locations. We're just not sure on the locations. The 2 that are proposed, Dawn Avenue does make sense because we have the MSU Center there, but Old M78, Saginaw Highway, we had a company that moved away when they would have been ideal candidates for this incentive. Do we use our PICAs for this? The mall? There's just a lot of questions as to what is the best place to do these smart zones. Tax increment finance capture is serious business, and we're about to approve one here without anyone really asking for it. It's kind of a solution in search of a problem. These are complicated measures as well. I know what it's going to take on my staff and the finance staff to do this reporting as this capture happens. It's worth doing if we've got a particular project, a particular developer, a particular region in mind here. But we just have a lot of questions about this one so far. I too am concerned about the control. We won't control this. It will be 1 vote out of 8 or 9 on a board that will approve these expenditures. That's nothing we've done before. And lastly, and probably my biggest concern is this, I'm afraid will be a distraction. High tech is fun and exciting and flashy, but we really need to focus on the basics of brick and mortar, walkability, get our village rebuilt downtown Okemos. We don't really need high tech right now. We need low tech, walkability, neighborhoods and villages in feel in Okemos and the Four Corners and Hazlet. To me, that should be our priority. If we move into this LDFA, it moves us away from our main focus, which is to bring back downtown Okemos and bring back the Four Corners and Hazlet and the Carriage Hills. Those are our 3 PICA areas. Those are the areas we're focused on. We've got incentives there that are not even being used by the current developer. They're using less than half of the incentives we have offered them. So incentives aren't the issue. It's moving these projects along, attracting developers that want to come here. There's incentives there already for these developers. We just need to find a developer that will use them with our current tax increment financing. This board, Trustee Opsimer in particular, worked so hard to get our various partner stakeholders to buy into, and they did. So the money's there, the incentives are there with our current TIFs. I don't think we need this additional TIF. Too many questions remain about it, and I think it's going to be a huge distraction for the board and for staff. Thank you.
I want to comment. I agree with both the comments of Mr. Opser and the Treasurer DeShane. I like the idea as an idea, and I'd like to come back to it. I wish that we had more time to look at this. Maybe next year would be the right time to give it real serious consideration. But we have, let's just get on the board. This board struggling with any tips whatsoever, even for brownfields. I mean, you know, and now we're at the point where we're doing tips at the DDA. We're looking at a lot of brownfields. We're looking at various things throughout the township in a much more generous way. And I sit on the Corridor Improvement Authority, and that's, you know, we created that back at a time when this board, and then the membership has changed, obviously, was reluctant to do TIFs, and it has no taxing power. And as a result, it's not really getting a lot done. It comes up with some great ideas, but nothing much happens because there's no way to finance those ideas. And I think that's a priority, and that includes Dawn Avenue, by the way. That's a priority that might supersede this one, even though this is generally a good idea. But I don't think it's timely for us at this point. I think we have other priorities. They've been mentioned by both Mr. Osmer and Mr. DeShane. And at this point, I'm just not, ready to dive into a TIF that for this purpose that we're just a very small part of in terms of any control or management of it, and yet we're going to be the second biggest taxpayer community, almost the same amount of tax base as Lansing as part of it, and only have one vote out of 8 or 9 or whatever it is. I don't know. There's a lot of things there to contemplate, and as far as technology goes, you know, the only real danger we have of losing what we have on Dawn Avenue now with the MSU lab there is that they would get free land from MSU. Other than that, I think it's going to be there, and it may attract others just by its presence. Others? Any comments? Ms. Guthrie.
Supervisor Spica, can I ask a few questions of Mr. Dempsey?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it so when the tax is captured, does Meridian Township keep 90% of the funds? Is that true?
That would be correct, yes.
Okay. So 10% goes to the Smart Zone group, and the other 90% stays in Meridian Township.
Under the current proposal for the current TIF plan, that's correct. That TIF plan would have to get approved by all 3 jurisdictions, but that is the current proposal.
Okay, and so when do they vote on that in 5 years, or is that set in stone?
So to clarify the budgeting and control process, it's correct that there would be a 9-member local development finance authority. They would have to recommend and ultimately approve a budget. However, the respective taxing jurisdictions also have to authorize the expenditures in their annual budget for their portion of the taxes. So Township Board would still have oversight of those funds on an annual basis. Typically the funds are budgeted, you know, in broad categories that give the LDFA board that flexibility, but the Township Board would have an annual review of that budget. So there is that level of control.
So correct me if I'm wrong. If I hear you correctly, are you saying that on an annual basis, the 9-member LDFA votes on the percentage that the communities keep each year? Is that what you just said?
The TIF plan proposes that this 90-10 is a new addition to this iteration of a plan. Historically, any TIF revenue that was generated in a jurisdiction would only be spent in that jurisdiction. The 90-10 split says that 90% of it will be spent in the jurisdiction where it's captured. Up to 10% of it could be spent in any of the 3 jurisdictions, depending on the need that's been identified. So that discretion would likely be at the LDFA level, where they could determine where that 10% gets allocated. But the other piece of it is that when that budget comes forward each year, once the estimate of TIF revenue for a particular year is known, and that's budgeted, each jurisdiction's governing board would have to also approve it. So there is that layer of oversight. So if at some point down the road there was an issue with maybe how that 10% was allocated in the prior year, you would have some ability to to steer those dollars or to indicate that you're not supportive of how it's being spent.
So it's not the 90% that comes up that's in question that stays with the township. It's the 10%, up to 10%. How is that 10% going to be spent? That's what comes into question with the 9-member board. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, from the standpoint that they're going to be recommending how that gets allocated. Now, they're also going to recommend how the 90% within your jurisdiction gets spent.
Within Meridian.
But you still have, but you still have the ability to either approve what they recommend or not.
Okay.
So,
and then
you really have, the bottom line is you have oversight on 100% of the funds captured in your jurisdiction.
And can you, I heard one township board member talk about high-tech and low-tech. Low-tech qualifies, is that correct? For how the money can be spent? To help a low-tech company?
It's not, the Smart Zone is designed to benefit high-tech companies. So, and there's a definition in the state statute that defines what that is, right? The typical things you'd expect it to be: software development companies, web companies, biotech, life sciences. It's either on that kind of software, Internet of Things space, or it's in the life sciences.
So what is low tech then? Because somebody mentioned that they'd rather see the money go to low tech. What is the difference? What is low tech?
I can't speak. I think that was that might have been one of the trustees here that noted that. But the differentiation, just like from the state perspective, the state often refers to kind of the non-high-tech businesses, Main Street businesses, so retail, restaurants, and there's a whole host of support programs that are being developed to help those types of businesses. The governor announced the $2.1 billion, array of programs to help address those. Now, the interesting thing about those proposals is that they're actually looking at modeling some of those support networks to align with the Smart Zones. So as this Smart Zone body moves forward, there may be the ability to tap additional state funding. So that's an important thing to think about. That's not to say that the township couldn't take advantage of those funds outside of this entity, but if the Smart Zone is going to be that entity for small business support network, then there might be additional advantages as well.
Are there, somebody also mentioned walkability, and in our study, the study talked about attracting more young people, and does this have that ability, having incentives going into Dunn Avenue? Does it help out with a more walkable place and incentivizing younger people, businesses to come here? That's what I'm looking at. That's one of the reasons why I'm supporting this. Is, these tech companies and improving what we currently have there, putting some money into it, and attracting, some different kinds of talent into Meridian Township.
So I guess if that's sort of a question my way, the way I would look at that is, when the Smart Zone was originally created for this region, I think it has been in other regions, the idea was that you're really trying to change the business culture of a community. If you look at the Lansing region, it was the three-legged stool historically: state government, GM, and Michigan State University. And I think everyone recognized that MSU and the potential to tap talent there was not being realized. The notion of the initial Smart Zone was to really create a culture around innovation that, hey, if you're an entrepreneur, you're welcome in this community. We're here to support you. We're creating this network. Now, do these two particular districts tie directly to walkability and supporting kind of Main Street type businesses? I think you could make
it would be a difficult argument for me to hear and tell you straight up that, yeah, that fits. It doesn't really fit that, but does it fit supporting high-tech businesses, the innovation and the activities taking place in the Van Camp Accelerator? Does it offer the potential to, maybe attract other entrepreneurs or build that ecosystem further by making it even more regional? I would argue yes. It does that. And that's all part, I think, of our larger region, and that's recognizing that entrepreneurialism is an important aspect of what the region's trying to achieve from an economic development perspective. So from that angle, attracting the talent and the types of entrepreneurs and the companies that create jobs and wealth, all of that then ultimately is going to help placemaking and the attractiveness of the region. So from that angle, I would argue that yes, there is a linkage.
Thank you. That is one of the big reasons why I support this. And when I visited the MSU wet lab, it's just full of entrepreneurs doing fantastic things, innovative, different outside the box kind of stuff. And I support entrepreneurs and innovation, and I support this money being pumped into these areas for those purposes. Thank you for answering my questions.
Welcome. Other board members? I believe I see Mr. Opsimer's hand up, but was that Ms. Wazlewski? She hasn't spoken yet. Go ahead.
Thank you, Supervisor. I appreciate this discussion. I really enjoy and like the opportunity to have this regional approach to opportunity. I can't even know how you said that, Tim, but entrepreneurialism. I think I got it. And I do agree that on a regional level that could overall assist in placemaking. I also like the idea of a public-private and academia partnership. And I think that is, like, long-term, that could be something that would really benefit Meridian and the region. However, I have to say that I do have some concerns, just that a lot of it is timing. This came pretty fast, not to say that Director Clark has not put in more than enough time to this, but we do have some big agenda items for us to commit to, and one of those being our downtown Pica areas, and knowing that we have not had much, if any, success with our TIFs in those areas, I'm a little apprehensive to add another TIF to our docket. I also would like to be able to give more thought to the location. Again, Dawn Avenue seems like that could be, it's in that corridor that I was not a part of, but the improvement corridor that Supervisor had mentioned, but the one up on Saginaw, that's just I don't know enough, but I do feel that we've got a mall that already has a organization in our business there that's running as high tech, and I feel that maybe if given some more thought to maybe some public input, we could look at that as an area of focus. The other concern is the control funds, and thank you, Clerk, for asking those questions, because all of those questions were in the back of my mind because I couldn't articulate. I'm not necessarily comfortable. Again, I think Trustee Opsmer said it. I'm not necessarily comfortable not knowing what we're going to invest in investing those funds. So I would certainly continue to entertain this conversation, but I'm just not in a position to support it at this time.
I would mention them all as part of the corridor improvement authority area as well.
Thank you.
Which is in desperate need of a TIF, in my opinion. Okay, anyone else? Well, first Mr. Officer was had, I believe, and then Ms. Jackson, and then Ms. Guthrie.
Yeah, so I think it's important anytime we're talking about public policy, to look at what has or hasn't happened in the real world. So when we look at regionally, the existing smart zone, Lansing has a $0 capture. they haven't seen any activity. And East Lansing's capture is only now being realized, and it's the hub building at Bogan Grand River. So it's a apartment building with Giorgio's and 7-Eleven beneath it, and Giorgio's and 7-Eleven were there. They sold the air rights to build the building above it. And so that's also an important factor to consider. We're not talking about capturing just eligible businesses. So it's not just if an eligible business goes in, the specific property taxes that can be captured by an LDFA are captured. It's any business regardless of whether or not it was the business sought to be attracted, right? And so in practice, we haven't actually seen success here in our region. I did try to go out and entertain this, and I read a lot of reports, and I couldn't find like a example of this LDFA or this smart zone attracted X company or Y company. I couldn't find, you know, this isn't an invention of the legislature. I work in the legislature. The legislature invents lots of things that don't necessarily pan out. So based on the research that I've done, I just don't see the utility. And so if we're not attracting the business that's eligible, and I would say that, so the Dawn Avenue zone, hypothetically, is actually already more successful than the Lansing Smart Zone. It has van camp. And so the infrastructure on Dawn Avenue is not holding van camp back. They're there, right? And when we look at diversity of the economy, I agree. Like, you know, we can't just be the auto sector and the traditional manufacturing sector. But so what has brought the greatest diversity? It's actually been Jackson National Life and the insurance sector, auto owners expanding. It's not high tech, but that has been the largest growing sector in the Lansing economy is insurance. Not an eligible business, I'm just putting that out there. So I'm not seeing the actual utility locally or in the other parts, and so I'm left to believe that the legislature invented a flawed concept in the early 2000s. But so if we did it, what are we actually doing? What's actually happening? So we're capturing ISD taxes, meaning intermediate school district, local school taxes, and then the state education tax, both the 6 mil and the 18 mil non-homestead, meaning it's only on businesses. Their personal property, meaning the equipment, and the real property, meaning their structure and their land. So we're capturing those taxes irrelevant of whether or not it's an eligible business, whether or not, so we could have 0 eligible businesses like Lansing, but have other businesses do something, right? They create incremental value, they invest in their business. So then we're capturing those taxes right there on Dawn Avenue to redo infrastructure on Dawn Avenue, but Dawn Avenue isn't a problem from an infrastructure standpoint, right? The whole point of TIF is you lock those taxes into that area because it needs extraordinary investment. What we'd be doing is taking education money that would otherwise go to our 4 schools, whether it be the local dollars or the dollars that go to the state and then come back to the local districts through Proposal A. But we'd be taking K-12 education money and investing it in Dawn Avenue, regardless of whether an eligible business ever comes. And so that's where just the mechanics of the whole thing just leave me scratching my head. Because, so Denny's might not be in it, but Ellison Brewing Company, if they expand, they're not an eligible business. But if they do something to improve their property, they create capture. We're capturing, just because Ellison Brewing Company did something, we're capturing K-12 education dollars and putting it into Dawn Avenue and associated infrastructure in that smart zone. And I can't wrap my head around why we would do that. So I think it's just important that we understand the mechanics and what taxes we're talking about and look at the local impact. And I'd like to see Lansing and East Lansing succeed, but more so to the other comments about the mall, I really think, and I've given this a lot of thought, because we talk about being careful with overdoing TIF. East Lansing has overdone TIF with their downtown, and it hurts their overall general fund, and it hurts revenue through restricted millages. most of our incremental growth occurs on the Grand River Avenue corridor. So we need to be careful. If you just create a TIF throughout that corridor, all of a sudden, we're not going to see, the usual growth that we see in our general operating millage, in our road millage, in our police and fire millages, parks, trails, everything. All of a sudden, we don't have, so we talked about the budget tonight, we don't have the money to do certain things, but I do think the mall could be, the start of a CIA TIF, just that area, because it's an area that requires that capture for infrastructure. Everywhere else on the corridor, it's flourishing. It doesn't need extraordinary infrastructure costs. And to the same point, on Saginaw Highway, when we look at the northern TIF zone, Menards was looking at going in at the old cinema site at Newton and Saginaw. They were willing to pay for a traffic light. MDOT wasn't going to pay for it. Like, it's one of those places where the private sector will pay for the infrastructure. There are those places where the private sector will do it, and that wasn't even a greenfield, because there's soil issues and there's old concrete and asphalt at that cinema site. So it's not even just a clean greenfield development. Those are just that's my thought process logistically when I look at this from a real world lens. But I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Trustee Jackson, you were next.
Yes. The first thing I'd like to say is we're not all on the same page here. We are not talking about the same thing. What we are here for tonight is not to decide on a smart zone, but to decide on whether or not we have a public hearing to discuss developing a smart zone that includes 2 specific areas in Meridian Township. That's the first thing. I've heard a lot of stuff that's very different from what I've read and what I've learned. First, relative to a TIF, and the TIF that is built or that is proposed for the smart zone. As I understand it, this TIF, as being proposed by the taxing authority, only takes increment funding from tax increment funding from school systems, the state school system, and the intermediate school system. And because the state created this process, that money is returned to those systems. So they're not losing anything. We're not taking anything from them to create a TIF in a smart zone. There are many other things that I'm bothered about in this conversation, one of which is the assumption that because the funds captured cannot be used in our PICAs, but must be used by whatever means in the smart zone, that it's not worth our time to consider and to participate in. As far as the capacity for the CIA to collect tax increment funding from building along Michigan Avenue is concerned, and the fact that Dawn Avenue is a part of that is real, but the corridor improvement group that operates the CIA that would have the capacity to collect TIF in that instance has no TIF collecting capacity. This proposal only operates for the next 5 years if we decide to participate. it probably take us, the way we do some things, it'll take us 3 years to develop a TIF capacity in the CIA, but that's another story. That's a whole other story. I am still prepared at this point to set a date for a public hearing to discuss at a public hearing the feasibility of Meridian Township developing or designating 2 areas, Dawn Avenue and the specific area on I-69, Saginaw and Towner Road. And that's what we're being asked to do, to have the public hearing and draw your conclusions after you've had a public hearing and we've had a total airing of that question. The public hearing, according to this resolution, is set for, October 19th. There is no assumption, there is no real assumption that we have committed to anything before that public hearing occurs. But we're at a point where we said we don't want to talk about it anymore because it doesn't help us with our development of our peakers. Well, I disagree. I think that we should at least explore through a public hearing the community's interest in entering into this corporation, or this partnership and agreement to promote the development of these types of businesses and enterprises in these 2 areas that people who've been operating this smart zone for 15 years have suggested are ripe for continued development in this way. Thank you.
I need to, as somebody who had 10 years in the school district board, I need to correct something. It would affect school funding because there's only one big pot of money for schools. And the way that's divided up is the state then parcels it out based on the number of pupils to all the different districts. If that part of money is diminished in any way, and there's no other source for that money but, what the legislature has come up with, it's not going to add to it. Every year they put over how much is going to be in it. If we start taking money out of it for tips for this or any other project, you are diminishing the amount of money that then can be sent per pupil to each of the districts. So it may be a small amount from a point of view of the minutia, just Meridian or this area, this particular smart zone. But when you start multiplying that over the whole state, it can be a substantial amount of money. And maybe it's a few dollars per student. And that few dollars per student can have an effect on what the school district can do. So it is not correct to say that it doesn't really impact the students. I had to interject. Ms. Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Sycon. Thank you, Trustee Jackson, for your comments. We are not voting on having a smart zone tonight. We are voting on having a public hearing. And I think Director Clark brought this to us in April. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
I think so. I think it was April or May.
In April or May, and this sets a public hearing for October 19th. It gives the board practically 30 days to look at a couple of these limiting questions. If we have them, clarify the amount of money with the schools. It's not voting to have a smart zone. It's putting a public hearing before the board, and then the board would decide after the public hearing. So thank you, Trustee Jackson, for pointing that out. And I also agree with Trustee Jackson that it's not just the peak of zones, it's not just the DDA. It's not just downtown Hazlet, it's all zones. All zones are worth our time. All zones are worth the township board discussing and seeing what we can do to improve those areas and attract talent of all kinds. And if there's a way that we can attract young people here, we can diversify our attraction, you will get more pupils at the school. You will have more students at the schools. It's not going to diminish any additional students. It's going to improve who is attracted, families who are attracted to coming to our area. So, but like Trustee Jackson said, all this does is put a public hearing on October 19th.
Okay, we've been talking about this a long time. Does anybody have any final comments on the race? Mr. DeShane.
Yes, real quickly. I think we have given this topic a full hearing. In essence, every meeting we have is a public meeting on these topics, and we haven't heard from the public. We could on October 19th, but I doubt it. I think this is the 4th or 5th time we've had this on the agenda. So we have given smart zones plenty of board time to discuss this. I appreciate Trustee Jackson's passion on this, but I continue to believe this dilutes our efforts to focus on the PICA areas with the existing TIFs that we have. The problem with working on all zones is that we dilute our efforts, and we need to be really focused right now on certain areas. And smart zones, I believe, will dilute our efforts and just make us that much less likely to succeed in the areas we are close to succeeding in. Thank you.
Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Trustee Jackson, for your comments. I agree that this would be something that would just be for public hearing, that we are just committing to an intent, not committing to an actual smart zone. But I'm hearing what the treasurer is saying is we've spent a lot of time on this, and I know Director Clark has spent a lot of time on this. We haven't received much feedback from the public, and I'm wondering what a public hearing could do to add to the decision-making for me specifically, but for the board in its entirety. So I am hearing that. I just don't know how beneficial that could be, although I think public hearings are important. And if we would have heard maybe some input at this point, that could change my thoughts. Again, the other thing about the zones, I hear what you're saying, Clerk Guthrie. We should be focusing on all of Meridian Township. I agree with that, but we have 3 zones that we have not been able to develop since I've been on the board. So when, Treasurer, you referred to a dilution, those just require so much time and effort right now. So I'm still a little stuck on the focus of our current objectives as well as the location of the proposed zones. That's where I stand.
Anyone else? Professor, what is the motion we have?
To approve the resolution of intent to set a public hearing for October 19th. And I believe the public hearing notifies the businesses in those areas so that they know what's happening and that they can come out and give us their opinion as businesses in that Saginaw district where this is in that Don Avenue.
But the motion is actually to approve the resolution to
set a public hearing date.
Okay. All right. Let's have the vote on it.
Sorry, I can't see. Supervisor Stichels?
No.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
No.
Trustee Jackson?
Yes.
Trustee Ostomer?
No.
Trustee Wazinski?
No.
Trustee Sumlin?
Yes.
Motion fails. 4-3.
Thank you. We now move up to 12C, which is the Daniels Drain SAD number 21, resolution number 1. The beginning process, which has already begun. A motion. Mr. DeShane.
I move, once I find the motion.
That page 2, it's the white page. Well, you're electronic. Second page.
I move to approve the Daniels Drain Public Drain Improvements Special Assessment District number 21. Resolution number 1 approves the Township Board funding 50% of the township share of the Daniels Drain Improvement cost from the general fund, and orders the Department of Public Works to use the plans developed by the Ingham County Drain Commissioner and prepare a special assessment district for the remaining cost.
Support.
Your support? Supported by Ossimer. Discussion, Mr. DeShane?
Yeah, this is the most the township has contributed to a drain project, but this is also a Section 20 drain, which technically could be all our expense because the township township government has a higher liability. We did get the comment from a neighbor of mine. I don't have his name handy, but in his case, this will be his 4th drain assessment. It's been taxed onto his annual tax bill. These drain assessments are becoming a bigger and bigger expense for our residents. We don't assess them. The drain commissioner does, but in certain areas of the township, they can add up and piggyback one after another. So in this case, the township using general funds to cover half the expense. Because it's a Section 20 drain with a higher public responsibility, it is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Others? Mr. Osmer and then Ms. Wazowski.
I also support the 50% contribution on the township's behalf. That is about a 43% increase in terms of our contribution towards other respective drainage projects. 35% is the highest we've contributed in the past, and we're contributing 15 percentage points more. So that's about a 43% increase over what we've done in the past, including the Tower Gardens drain project, which was considerable in terms of cost. I believe the total cost of that was actually greater than this drain project even back then. I think we need to think about equity as well. That was a low-income neighborhood, working-class neighborhood who didn't get that, and so I think the precedent that we're setting has ramifications. So I think we just need to think about that. Same with Powell Road, same with that special assessment district, which, when we had that conversation there, it did result in that. The drain or the special assessment role is what it is up in Tower Gardens. I just think we need to think about that moving forward to make sure that there's equity and certain neighborhoods aren't treated differently than others. My only other comment on this is, there are still a lot of families dealing with flood issues. I've actually worked with a number of them in my day job, and I'm just wondering, Manager Welsh, I believe Darla is out of the office. Do we have someone monitoring Meridian Cares right now? Because I know I've referred a couple of people to Meridian Cares as well as other funds. We've got owner-occupied and tenants renting who are still without housing or still in hotels. And we've tried to direct them to 211, Department of Health and Human Services and other funds, but there's some folks that are still really struggling, and the tenants are struggling to get repairs done, right? Because they're at the they're kind of at the they're hindered by their landlord, and when the landlord will actually get the repairs conducted. So do we have an update? It looks like Deputy Manager Perry does.
I was just going to speak. I think Miriam's actually left, but Miriam's been taking those calls that go to Darla.
Okay.
Darla reports to Miriam, the finance director, so Miriam's been fielding those calls.
Okay. I hope we would just be conscientious and mindful that, and be supportive through the CARES Fund with these families, because there's, the state programming has rigidities and often doesn't cover some of these folks who are above certain socioeconomic factors. But my understanding is the co-op's insurance didn't cover a lot of the damage this time around. So what I became aware of through working with one owner of the co-op is because this drain project has taken so long, we initiated it. They denied coverage, from my understanding, based on the fact that this was a second event, and the original cause of the flood, the drain failure, hasn't been corrected during that time, and so the insurance company's denying. So I just want staff to be mindful of that and to help families in need. Thank you.
Okay, I think it was Courtney the next one?
No, Supervisor, I'm sorry, I was just moving too much.
Oh, okay, I understand. Anyone else want to comment on this before we vote? I will just mention this, I agree that this is the township, it's a big chunk we're contributing, but I think it's the right thing to do in this case. We have a lot of homeowners here that are being burdened in big ways. Okay, we need a vote, I guess.
All right, Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Yes. Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Seika?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Jackson?
Yes.
And Trustee Osmer?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
This one and the one after it is going to go through very quickly as time marches on. The next one is the Silverstone Estates Street Lighting SAD number 427, resolution number 3 that we had the public hearing on. Is there any need for anything further from you, Mr. Perry, on this?
I don't really have anything to add unless people have questions. This next step is resolution 3, which pretty much allows us to move forward with the construction of the project.
Would someone like to make a motion? Ms. Wazinski.
I move to approve Silverstone Estates Public Street Lighting Improvement Special Assessment District number 427, resolution number 3, which approves the construction of public improvement, the estimate of cost, and defray of the cost of special assessment. Determine the special assessment district and directs the making of an assessment roll.
Support.
Supported by Osmer, was that?
Correct.
Any need to discuss? Do we need a vote?
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Supervisor Seika?
Yes.
Trustee Jackson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Yes. Trustee Osmer?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Next one is the 2021 order to maintain sidewalk SAD number 19, resolution number 3. And we need somebody who's a good reader, because this is a long resolution.
As opposed to me.
Who wants to make the motion? Mr.
I move to approve the 2021 order to maintain sidewalk special assessment district number 19, resolution number 3, which approves the repair and maintenance of sidewalk in portions of the following areas: Briarwood number 3, number 4, number 5, East Meadows condominiums, Heritage Hills number 2, 3, 4, Ember Oaks, Sunwind Estates, and the Sanctuary, which are located in sections 8, 32, 33, 34, and 35, to defray the cost by special assessment, approves the cost estimate of $25,850.12, determines the special assessment district, directs the making of an assessment roll, directs notices to be sent to the property owners indicating that they have 20 days to replace or make safe the defective sidewalk.
For a moment there, I was going to change their careers and get into concrete. With the 25 million. Is there support for that motion?
Support.
Everybody clear? All right. Any need to discuss this? We heard earlier from Mr. Perry on it. Sidewalks need fixing. Do we need a vote?
All right. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Jackson?
Yes.
Trustee Assimer?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Syka?
Yes.
And Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Our last one is something you should have got via email yesterday, I believe. And it's a resolution in recognition of Hispanic Heritage Month. And it's something I put together. The actual month runs from September 15th to October 15th. It's an annual thing that's been going on since the days of President Johnson in the White House, that'd be in the 1960s. And it's a very important time to recognize Treasurer.
I move to approve the resolution in recognition of Hispanic Heritage Month.
Support.
With your permission, I'd like to read the resolution.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Whereas there's been a long and important presence of Hispanic and Latino Americans in the Charter Township of Meridian, and whereas each year our nation observes National Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15th to October 15th by celebrating the histories, cultures, and contributions of American citizens whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. And whereas each year the United States recognizes the economic, cultural, and social contributions that Spanish-speaking peoples have brought to our nation and Meridian Township, including the gifts of law, religion, agriculture, art, music, education, technology, architecture, cuisine, theater, and exploration. And whereas this township is fortunate to count amongst its population a large concentration of citizens of Spanish and Latin American descent, including those who have lived in Meridian Township for generations, and those who are new to the township, who contribute to our economy and society through their commitment to our professions, commerce, family, and the arts. And whereas during the month of September 15th to October 15th, this township Hispanic American community celebrates Hispanic Heritage Month through a series of special programs featuring Hispanic history, food, dance, and art. And whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month is a period of time in the United States when people recognize the contributions of Hispanic and Latino Americans to the United States, including Meridian, and celebrate these people's varied heritage, background, and culture. And now therefore be it resolved by the Township Board of the Charter Township of Meridian, Ingham County, Michigan, by the Board of the Charter Township of Meridian, that it recognizes and celebrates the contributions, service, and cultures of township residents whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America.
All right. I don't play discussion. If not, we need a vote.
Trustee Assimer?
Yes.
Trustee Jackson?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Supervisor Syka?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
And Trustee Sunland? Yes. Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you all. We now move on to our discussion items, and I would note as we start this discussion that we actually received a request from this particular applicant or party, the Woodward Limited Dividend Housing Association, asking that we consider suspending our rules and taking action on this tonight. If as we discuss it, somebody wants to make that motion, I certainly will entertain it. I'll also note that the Planning Commission did exactly that when it reviewed it. They decided to go forward at the time it had it on for discussion with action. So the item is the Special use permit number 21-19-121, Woodward Way Limited Dividend Housing Association, modification of plans to construct a building greater than 25,000 square feet. Who wants to start the discussion? Mr. Opsor?
We do have Director Schmidt here. I don't know if he has an introduction.
Oh, fine. I'm glad you pointed it out to me. Go ahead, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you very much. Briefly, given the hour, I will limit my comments. The request in front of you this evening is to reconfigure the Woodward Way project at the end of Sir Hall Drive, north of Whole Foods. The applicant had not gotten in touch with the road commission until late in the project and realized that they had an access issue, and prompting this redesign to include the cul-de-sac on the property. The proposal in front of you contains the same number of units as before, contains slightly less square footage actually, by about 3,500 square feet, 3,100 square feet, 4,100 square feet, and the building is actually slightly shorter by some inches, not by a substantial amount, but slightly shorter. Essentially what they've done is they have gone to a housing plan that includes stacked units and no townhouses, whereas before they had some units that were stacked and some were townhouses. When they were in 4 buildings, they had some more flexibility, but this would retain the project at 49 units, which allows them to move forward with 1 point of access to the project. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this and did approve the special use permit for the multi-family use on the property, which is a requirement in the zoning district. Be happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Hey. Now, discussion. And I've got a picture in the way of my picture here. Just a minute. Mr. Opsmer.
So I support the application before us and have no concerns with the amendment as proposed. My only question would be just regarding, obviously there's other issues going on with the applicant in this case. So is the cul-de-sac needed, Director Schmidt, if they connected through the development to the other roadway? Or is it only needed because we've turned it into a cul-de-sac?
So they needed to find access. They needed to get a design access that would meet the road department's approval. And so obviously punching a full road through would be an option. The road department has concerns with utilizing that connection on Greencliff for a variety of reasons and brought that up early. So the focus of the conversation has largely been on how do we make the connection at Sir Hall meeting the road department's requirements.
Okay. What are the road department's concerns about connecting to Greencliff?
So they had concerns about adding new roadway in general, and especially with the original design, it essentially was a road that went into a parking lot that then came out to a stub. Additionally, the area on Greencliff is currently being used by the 2 other property owners adjacent, and it would require some substantial reworking of those homeowners' lot use of the area.
Oh, okay. That right-of-way is not owned by the county anymore?
It is owned by the county. It is being used by the property owners.
As vacant land, or?
It's a little bit of parking, a little bit of access, a little bit of storage, a little bit of vacant land, a little bit of everything.
All right. Well, that's interesting. But so they've obviously approached the township about contributing toward this beyond just the payment in lieu of taxes that we've approved and other things. Is the cul-de-sac infrastructure driving those costs, or if not, what is?
No, the costs are being driven largely by the larger macroeconomic forces that are pushing the cost of every project higher at this point.
Lumber, labor, steel.
Yeah. You name it. It's driving the cost up. We've started to see some of those costs come down, but compared to 2 years ago when they originally priced this out, it's probably substantially higher.
Yep. Okay, that's all I have. I support suspending our rules later, but I'll turn it over to the rest of the board. Thank you.
Mr. DeShane.
So just to clarify, this change from the townhouses to all two-story is being driven not by the cul-de-sac, but by the economics of construction cost today for this project. Is that your understanding?
No, the change in the unit type is being driven entirely by the cul-de-sac. They approached the county about the original design had 4 buildings on the property, and they approached the county initially about having the road sort of come through the development, and that obviously wasn't going to work. And then they tried to work on an alternative cul-de-sac design, slightly smaller. Would have required additional land from the property owner that sold them the land. He was not interested in selling. And so ultimately what they determined in order to get this project moving, because it is a tax credit project and they're trying to move quickly now, is putting the cul-de-sac in a standard design on their property was the best move to solve that problem. Essentially what that did is the southern building kind of had to go away, and so they were able to it made sense for them to reconfigure the other buildings to accommodate the units. What it does do is it saves them some money from a construction standpoint. It certainly saves them from a construction management standpoint in the long run, because they're not managing 4 buildings, they're only managing 2 during the construction process.
Yes, I understand. Follow-up question, has MSHDA approved these revised plans?
I do not have a status on the MSHDA application at this point. Mr. Fugate is here this evening, and he may be able to speak to that.
We have, well,
Frank, the question is, going from 4 buildings to 2 buildings, has MSHDA approved the revised site plan?
That is in the process right now, of having them look at that and to review that process for us.
Do you expect that they will?
Yeah.
All right,
We
thank
will
you.
check.
okay, other board members? Trustee Wazinski.
The only comment, thank you for your questions, a lot of the questions Treasurer had, I agree, or I also had. I do remember, this has been a while now, but I do remember the residents, the most amount of comments that we had was the residents and that access to Green Cliff. So I do appreciate, although reducing, even though we have the same number of units, it would be nice to have the variety of units, but making sure that we don't have that access through Green Cliff, I think, is important to the residents.
Other board members, Trustee Jackson.
Yes, Mr. Smith, wasn't the inhibition of an access to the neighborhood to the east an actual condition of the approval?
It was obviously subject to the road department's ultimate approval.
Right.
And it further eliminated the possibility when discussing it with them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? I'm not seeing Clerk or Ms. Sutherland on my screen at this point.
I have a question, Supervisor Spica.
Okay, you're not, there you are, now you're on the
Thank you. Does the applicant expect that MSHDA approval
Yes.
to happen?
It shouldn't fundamentally alter their MSHDA approval, given it's same number of units, same type of units. The tax credit deal is still in place, but they do need to get that approval.
Okay. Okay, so because there was not significant changes, expect the same thing, that approval to happen
Correct.
with MSHDA. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Opsmer.
I'll move to suspend our rules for same night consideration.
Support.
Support.
Supported by Guthrie. All those in favor of suspending the rules so we can take the action on this tonight? Need a vote?
We should take a roll call
Well,
vote.
we got it. It's virtual, partial virtual, we got to do it tonight.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Jackson?
Yes.
Trustee Opsmer?
Yes.
Trustee Sutherland?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Syka?
Yes. Okay, so, all
Motion to suspend the rules carries 7-0.
right, so now we have in front of us the need for a motion. Mr. Epstein.
Give me just one moment to flip back to the beginning of this item. I move to approve special
use permit?
Yeah, I move to approve special use. Just give me a moment here, okay? I move to approve special use permit number 21-19-121, Woodward Limited Dividend Housing Association, building greater than 25,000 square feet.
Support.
Supported by trustee. Any further discussion? Yeah, I guess, I don't see any hands, I guess we're ready to vote on this.
All right, Trustee Summers?
Yes.
Yes. Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Trustee Optimer?
Yes.
Trustee Jackson?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Was that yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Supervisor Syka?
He votes yes.
Right, motion carries 7-0.
Thank you all very much. We're now ready to go on to comments from the public, and I saw Mr. Geevy's handing cards to Mr. Perry. So, Mr. Perry, do we have citizens?
We do. We have Mr. Michael Hamill.
Mike Hammer, 4134 Benkaway, and also the fire chief. I just wanted to actually thank Representative Brixey and Trustee Opsimer for the gracious thinking of us with the $250,000 grant. It's truly a surprise. So on behalf of the fire department, the men and women of the fire department, I want to thank you both. This is something that's actually awesome for the township. And the reason I say that is because it'll offset some budget money in the future for other departments and other needs we have. So it's really a gracious gift, and I thank you.
You are welcome, and I'm not the one you think. Okay. Other comments from the public? Anyone that's present? There is one.
Cecilia wants to speak again.
Again, you're limited to 3 minutes. Start with name and address.
Yes, hello. Cecilia Kramer, 4560 Oakwood. And I just wanted to show my appreciation and thanks to the board for their extraordinary gift of taking half of that assessment. That truly is appreciated. Thank you very much from all of the homeowners.
I'll once again say you're welcome. Okay, are there other speakers?
I don't see any. Steven says no from his end.
Not on the virtual side of it either, huh?
Nope.
Alrighty. Then we'll go on to other matters from the board. I want to mention as part of this other matters from the board, to ask Mr. Perry to make sure that citizen is spoken at the beginning, gets the information to where to go. I believe it's going to be with the Drain Commission office with regard to 4 different drains, etc. And I think you have a record of who that was.
I do, yep.
Go ahead, Mr. Deshawn.
Just a reminder to folks that might have missed September 14th tax deadline. That was the deadline, and if you missed the date, by law, 1% interest penalty has been added to your taxes. But please come in this week before October 1st, because another 1% will be added that date. So we want to work with you. So if you haven't yet paid your summer taxes, give our office a call, 853-4140, and we'll talk to you and see what we can do to help. But don't ignore it. Please contact the Treasurer's Office if you've not yet paid your summer taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Other board members? I don't see any enthusiastic hands coming up. If not, we need a motion to adjourn. Trustee Osmer? Moves to adjourn. Board? Everybody clerk? Objection? Then we're adjourned. Thank you all for an excellent meeting. We got a lot done tonight, a lot of tips, and appreciate everybody's hard work.
Recording stopped.